About a week ago, one of my students asked me if it is possible to use trigrams to determine timing, to find out what is the best time to start a business or some other kind of event, what you in English call timeliness. And I don't think we have a good word for that in Dutch. At least I've never found it. But what you call timeliness, finding the right time to do something. And my first response was, nah, you can't use trigrams for finding the right time to do something. I mean, there are other systems that are more suited for finding the right time, like Wen Wanhua is a system that is seems as if it's specifically designed to find the right timing. And you have plum blossom numerology, which is also connected to the Chinese calendar. So my first response was, well, no, you can't really use trigrams for timing. But then I thought that in ancient China, oracles were almost always used in combination with the Chinese calendar. And an answer from an oracle was always compared with the seasons and to find out if the answer from the oracle matched with the seasons. And we know from old sources that also the trigrams were connected to the seasons. And so that got me thinking, if trigrams were connected to the seasons, maybe it's possible to use the trigrams for timing. So I started to investigate this idea of using trigrams for timing. And I was curious, of course, how and if they did use trigrams for timing in ancient China. And I started to dig in my books and my file repository. And well, this video is about what I found about that. And the study of timing, timeliness, is very interesting subject. It's with a very expensive word. It is called hemerology. No, it doesn't have anything to do with hemorrhoids. That's not what we're going to talk about. Hemerology is the study of calendars and then more specifically finding the right timing, the appropriate days, the auspicious days for certain events. And everyone who's familiar with the Chinese almanac, you know that the almanac has this section with finding the right days for going to the barbershop or to bury your grandma. For almost every little thing, there's an appropriate day or an inauspicious day. And in the Chinese medicine, this is also used, and then it's called iatromancy. And that is the use of hemerology for medical purposes. And I find it very interesting subject to study. Also because there seem to be some hints in the I Ching, in the text of the I Ching, that the I Ching was also connected to this idea of hemerology. So, and there have been certain day books have been excavated, the so-called Reshu, which also talk about auspicious days and inauspicious days. So it's a very important topic, and all these manuscripts also show that oracles were used with in combination with the Chinese calendar. So let's look at how they did that. We know from the Shokwa section of the Ten Wings that trigrams were connected to the seasons. And I have here the page of Donald Sturgeon with his wonderful collection of ancient classics. And we have here the text from the Shokwa, where the Shokwa talks about the 8 trigrams connected to the 8 directions of the compass. And there's also one trigram that is connected to a season. If we look at the text, at least the part that is important to us, then we will see here it starts with thunder being connected to the east. Let me get a little smaller dot here. This is a little bit too big line. Thunder is connected to the east, and then we have trigram wind connected to the southeast, etc., etc., etc. There's not any mention of any season so far. Here we have trigram fire connected to the south. That's what it says here. And then we have earth, but still no season is mentioned in these lines. Then we have lake, which is connected to autumn. Well, now we have a trigram connected to a season. And this is in the Shokwa the only trigram that is really connected to a season, which is interesting. All the other 7 trigrams are not really connected to a season, but this gives us a starting point. Trigram lake is connected to the season of autumn. By the way, the translation that you see here is the translation of James Legge, and it's not the best translation. And there's also a slight error here in the text. I noticed that here it says here's trigram kan, and then it says gen, but after kan follows gen. So this is an error in the transcription. It's not an error in James Legge's version because he used a different transcription system, and Donald Sturgeon replaced that transcription system with the Pinyin transcription, but there's a slight error here. Well, nothing really important, but just so you know that there's something needs to be corrected there. I'll notify Donald of it. So there is one trigram that is connected to the season here, and that is lake, which is connected to the autumn. This section describes the Gotye and Bagua trigram circle, and we're going to look at that later. This is not the only text that connects trigrams, or more than one trigram, in fact, to the seasons, because in the Shurfa manuscript, we also have mention of the seasons and connected to the trigrams. And in this text, it is said that certain trigrams are auspicious and others trigrams are inauspicious in a season. So, for instance, we have the trigram of spring. This is spring. And it says that a trigram wind is very auspicious in the season of spring. And here it says the trigram water. In the Shurfa manuscript, water and fire are swapped. We can have a huge debate about that, whether that is intentional or whether it's an error. But let's not do that. This is not the right place for that. And so here it says that water is slightly auspicious in spring, etc., etc., etc. And so for every season, there are the trigrams mentioned, and certain trigrams are auspicious in a season and other trigrams are inauspicious. So this is also a manuscript that shows that trigrams are connected to the seasons, just as the Shokwa shows with the trigram lake. So, which means that we can add the seasons to the Gotye and Bagua trigram circle, which is actually quite simple. These two, excuse me, here's my pen. These two trigrams are the season of spring, and then we can say that these two trigrams are my pen is refusing a little bit, but we will manage. And these two trigrams are autumn, and the last two trigrams are winter. So here you have timing with the trigrams. So we have one season for two trigrams. So if you're looking for some sort of timing, then you can use this. It's very rough timing. It only points to seasons, but, well, it is some sort of timing. And this was already used in ancient China, as we can see in the Shiva manuscript. Because in this manuscript, the trigrams are connected to the season. So this should, in theory, this should work fine. But I was thinking, there should be, it should be possible to make it more precise. And just as here in the West, the seasons are connected to the months of the calendar. And just as here in the West, the Chinese calendar, at least the solar calendar, has 12 months. And each season has 3 months. So I thought, is it possible to use that for some more precise timing? And to explain what the Chinese wrote about that, we have to look at the so-called Jieqi, the solar terms. And I have here a website which explains these solar terms. The Chinese calendar, the solar calendar, which is directly related to the position of the Earth around the Sun, so the orbit of the Earth around the Sun. The Chinese solar calendar has 12 months, and each month is divided into so-called Jieqi. And here you see a picture of these, in total 24 Jieqi. And this picture actually explains how it works with the Jieqi. And the first Jieqi, so the start of the Chinese calendar, is I forgot to get my pencil all the time. Here we are. It starts here with this point. That they numbered it here with the J and with the C. The numbers are the months. So we have month 1 to 12, and the J and the C refer to the first part of the month and the second part of the month. So each month has 2 of these Jieqi. So J1 is the first month, and that month is called Li Chun, and that's the beginning of spring. And Li Chun always begins, well, almost always on February the 4th. And that's the nice thing about the solar calendar. It always has a more or less fixed starting date. It can be February 4th or February 5th, but it will never be starting in March or January. And that's the nice thing of this solar calendar. It's really connected to the seasons, and we can use that when we use the trigrams and the I Ching. So that's Li Chun. That's the first of these 24 Jieqi. Now, we're not going to list all these 24 Jieqi that I mentioned here. All you need to know is the first one, and I'm just going to number these Jieqi from 1 to 24, because that's easy to remember. This is the first one, and this is the second one, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, etc. So that is how I will number these 24 Jieqi. That's easiest to remember. And just remember the name of the first one here, Li Chun, because that is what we will use as a starting point. So when we go back to this picture, then we have the start of the year is here, which is February the 4th. And there are 8 points in this circle that are the most important points, for 8 most important Jieqi. And that's of course the first one. And if we going to skip 2, when we're going through the circle, then we find the 8 major points in the Chinese solar calendar. So we have this point, J1 is an important point, and then C2, which is the spring equinox, which is also an important date in our calendar, March 21st. That's what we find as the start of spring. Then we have J4 as an important date, and we have this one, the summer solstice, as an important date. And J7 is an important one. And then we have this one is important, which is the autumnal equinox. This point is also important. And then finally, we have this point here, which is the winter solstice, December 21st. So, and these are the most important points in the solar calendar. And you can more or less see why that is, because we have here the summer solstice and the winter solstice and spring equinox and autumn equinox. And, well, I don't know the Western names for these points, but they also have certain name, I'm sure of that. These points are also important in our calendar. By the way, when you see here summer solstice and winter solstice, and spring equinox and autumn equinox, these points more or less refer to, or I should say it correctly, refer to the northern hemisphere, because on the southern hemisphere it's turned around, and that has to do with the tilt of the Earth. I'm not going to explain how that works, but this picture is describes the points connected to the northern hemisphere. So we have these 8 points on a circle. Doesn't that sound familiar to you? 8 points on a circle. Well, of course it does, because we have also seen that in the Gotyen Bagua trigram circle. Here we have also 8 points in a circle. So I was wondering, are these 8 major points connected to the 8 trigrams, which actually would make a lot of sense. And I started digging in my books, and I found this book, the Tongwayen, it is called, and it is one of the Wei literature, the Apocrypha. You have the Jing, the I Jing, Shu Jing, Shi Jing, etc. The book of the poetry and the book of history, and of course the book of changes. These are all Jing, and there are a few more. And besides the Jing, you have the Wei literature, which is in the West often translated as the Apocrypha, which here in the West, Apocrypha are often considered some sort of lesser literature, especially compared to the Bible. But in China, the Apocrypha didn't really have a lesser status. They were seen just as valuable additional literature to the Jing. So the Wei was actually a selection of 8 books that told about principles connected to the I Ching. So this book, the Tongwayen, is also one of these Apocrypha, and they're traditionally dated somewhere in the Han Dynasty. If this book is really from the Han Dynasty is not sure. There's commentary coming with it that is attributed to Zheng Xuan, who lived somewhere after the Han Dynasty, I believe. But anyway, in the Tongwayen, we find this mention of these 8 major points that I talked about connected to the trigrams. And I already looked it up where it is, and I'm just going to use my search bar for it. There it is, ta-da! And here we have the text of the Tongwayen. This is, by the way, the site of my good friend Jack Quo, who has digitized all the major important I Ching books. So this is a digitized version of the Tongvayen. And here we see that trigram heaven is connected to the region of the northwest, and it governs point Litong, which is the start of winter in the solar calendar. So trigram heaven is connected to this solar term, Yachi Litong. And you see here text in somewhat thinner font. That's commentary. I think that's the commentary by Zheng Xuan. And if we go on like this, then we should also find the other trigrams. Let me see where that is. Oh yeah, we had Chen, and further up in the text we have trigram water, and which is connected to the north, and it is connected to the winter solstice. So this text shows that the trigrams are connected to these 8 major points. And the Tongvayen isn't the only text that connects the 8 trigrams to these major points of the solar calendar. I've read some articles about the Tongvayen, and they say that this system is also used in the Yizhuan by Jingfang, the famous inventor of the 8 palaces system, the 8 houses. If you think I've heard that before, the 8 houses, well, then you maybe have read Wilhelm's translation from the first page to literally the last page, because the very last page of Wilhelm's I Ching translation mentions these 8 palaces or 8 houses. And Jingfang is the person who came up with that system. And the articles that I read about the Tongvayen also say that Jingfang mentions the same system. So it's apparently relatively old, the connection of these 8 major points to the 8 trigrams. And when you're connecting them to the 8 trigrams, you're also automatically connecting them to the Hojian Bagua trigram circle. I'm connecting the trigrams here, but Herman Bohn, in his exceptionally and very important and well-written dissertation, Die Rezeption des Zhaoyi in der chinesischen Philosophie von den Anfängen bis zur Song-Dynastie. Yes, it's written in German, I'm sorry. But it's an extremely interesting book about all kinds of systems and calendar systems and Shangshu kind of I Ching study. It's all mentioned in there. And he also writes something about this passage from the Tongvayen, what I was talking about here, with the trigrams connected to the compass and the Yachi. But Bone, and he's probably right about that, because he looks at the context in which it is being said. He links it actually to the hexagrams. He says here that Chen, being hexagram 1 in the northwest, governs point Litong, the start of winter in the Chinese calendar. And here he says that hexagram 29 in the north, and it governs point Dongzhi, the winter solstice, etc. So he explains it as referring to hexagrams, the hexagrams which have the trigrams doubled. So, and he also explains the reason behind this system from the Tongvayen. And according to his explanation, which is here, he says, well, it is based on the Guazi theory of Jingfang, who used similar kind of reasoning, that these hexagrams tell about the right kind of activities and attitudes for each season, for each Yachi. And if you're not doing what is connected to these hexagrams in the right Jiechi, in the right season, then catastrophes in nature will occur. So this is how the Tongva Yen actually uses the hexagrams, um, which is a very old practice to combine hexagrams with the calendar and to say through that system which are what is an appropriate time to do something and which kind of activities you should avoid, etc. Just like the Chinese almanac and the day books, they use the same kind of reasoning. So Herman Bohn explains it as hexagrams, but that doesn't really matter for our purpose because we can still see the names as references to the trigrams and more specifically to the Hotian Bagua trigram circle. So, and of course there are pictures of that system. Here we have a picture of the Hotian Bagua trigram circle combined with these 8 major points in the Chinese calendar. So, and just to remind you, these points are connected to our calendar as well, because this list tells you what is the starting point for each, the starting date for each of these points. So now we have found a way to narrow down the scope of the time scope for each trigram, because now we have these points connected to them as well. So, which is very helpful. By the way, in this picture, it says here that it shows the Hotian Bagua trigram circle with the guashu, the timing of each hexagram picture. This is the Hotian Bagua trigram circle, but if you look carefully, you will see that it has been turned anti-clockwise, 90 degrees anti-clockwise, because here we have the trigram fire and here is trigram lake. I don't know why they did this. It beats me, because this is not how you normally draw the Hotian Bagua trigram circle. So don't do your head like this. That's not necessary, because I turned the picture for you. Ta-da! Here we have the right, the proper Hotian Bagua trigram circle. And then we will see that this starting point of the Chinese calendar, the point Li Chun, is connected to trigram mountain. So trigram mountain is the start of the Chinese calendar. So, so this gives us an idea how to work with trigrams combined with these 8 major points of the Chinese calendar. So, but there are still 16 of these Jiechi are missing, and that's a pity, because wouldn't it be nice if we could also connect these to the trigrams? So I started to dig in my books again, and I have this. By the way, this picture is from the Yishui Datsujian Dictionary of I Ching Terminology. But I also have a lot of picture books with pictures from all kinds of topics related to the I Ching. And one of these pictures was found in a PDF, which has a huge amount of pictures in it. You see here, this is the last part of a 3-volume book, which consists of more than 1,000 pages. So I estimate there are about 3,000 pictures in the complete set. And this is the picture that I found with all the 24 Jiechi connected to the 8 trigrams. The name of this picture, though, is a little bit funny, if that is the right word, because it says here that in the time of the Xia dynasty, the head or the start is Zungen, pure gen, and that almost always refers to hexagram 52, so not to trigram mountain, but it actually refers to the hexagram mountain. There we are. Picture. It's picture. So Xia dynasty had Zungen toe. Oftewel, that's Dutch. Oftewel, sorry. In other words, this is a picture that is connected to something else and not really the Chinese calendar. That's not the title of this picture. So, but fortunately, it is being explained why this picture is being made. And we can go to the explanation for that on the next page. It's picture number 11. And this is the text from this book. Why is it such a thick line? This really doesn't make any sense whatsoever. I need this one. So, title of this book, the Sanyi Baiyi, which is written by this guy, and I think he Zhu Yuan. Oh, I can't remember the pronunciation of the last character. Anyway, I believe he lived somewhere in the end of the Song Dynasty or the beginning of the Ming Dynasty. I think around 1100. So it's not really an old text, but he explains the reasoning behind the picture. He says here that in commentary to the Zhao Li, that this guy Gu talked about the Lian Shan and the meaning of the name of the Lian Shan. And Lian Shan is one of the 3 hexagram books. The old texts say that there were 3 hexagram books. We had the Gui Tang, the Lian Shan, and the Zhao Yi. And you are all familiar with the Zhao Yi. So this text talks about Lian Shan. And Lian Shan means doubled or connected mountains. And it says that the Lian Shan had the pure hexagram gen, hexagram 52, as the first hexagram, so the head of the hexagrams, the first hexagram. And gen is mountain. We have mountain on top and mountain below, because that, after all, is a hexagram 52. Twice mountain, therefore the name is Lianshan, connected mountains. And this guy Gu, in his notes, in his explanations, he examined the Shokwa, the text of the Shokwa, and based on that, he says that in the Xia dynasty, the timing system, in the timing system of the Xia dynasty, they established the 3rd branch of the Chinese calendar as the start Zheng. And the Zhengyue, that's the first month. And this branch from the Chinese calendar, the 3rd branch, is always connected to the first month of the solar calendar. And it says here that pure gen, in other words, hexagram 52, is connected to Li Chun, the start of spring. And spring is the head or the start of the seasons, the timing. So therefore, Gan is the start of the Lianshan Yi. So what this text is saying that, well, you know, why does the Lianshan start with hexagram 52, what we call hexagram 52, twice mountain? Well, because the spring is connected to point Li Chun, and Li Chun is the start of the year, and therefore the Lianshan also starts with twice hexagram mountain. And that is actually the reasoning behind this picture. That's the whole purpose of this picture. And here we have the 24 Jatsi connected to the 8 trigrams. And there's also a little bit more into it, but we're not going to discuss that because we also have the branches here. Here we have the branch number 3, which is connected to the first month of the solar calendar. Also other branches connected to it and stems from the Chinese calendar, but that's not important here. What is important here is that we find all the 24 jets you connect to the trigrams. The stupid thing, though, about this picture is that it has been turned. Because this is the Gotyenbagwa trigram circle. And we have trigram mountain here. And let me see, we have trigram thunder here, and here we have trigram wind, and then we have trigram fire, etc. So this is the Gotyenbagwa trigram circle, but in the proper orientation, that's this, then the trigram mountain should be here. So this is another case where the Gotyenbagwa trigram circle has been turned. And I don't know why, but it is interesting, though, that I have found 2 pictures now in which the Gotyenbagwa trigram circle has been turned. And I'm sure there is some reason behind it, but I haven't found it out yet. So, but for our purpose, it is best to look at the proper orientation. And fortunately, this picture is also given in my famous Yishui Datsujian Dictionary of I Ching terminology, and that's this picture. And you can see here that it has the same title as the picture, as the former picture, the Shenshu Shou Chun Gun the Tu. So this picture is in the Yishui Datsujian also connected to this idea of the Lianshan being from the Xia dynasty, starting with hexagram 52, of which the name is Gun. So here we have the Gotyenbagwa trigram circle in the proper orientation, and here we have the starting point of the calendar Li Chun. And we can also find the other important points that I mentioned earlier in the center of each section. So this is how the 24 Yatsi from the Chinese calendar, solar calendar, are connected to the 8 trigrams. And isn't it interesting that we have 3 of these Yatsi connected to each trigram? And isn't it interesting that a trigram is made of 3 lines? And you probably already know in which direction I am taking this, because we can connect each of these Yatsi to a line of a trigram. So if I'm going to number these Yatsi, whoop, need my pencil here. Then here we have the first Yatsi, then we have the second one, and the third, and the fourth, and the fifth, I say fifth, and the sixth one here, and the seventh, and the eighth, and the ninth, and the 10th, etc. So this is how you can number these Yatsi, and you can use these numbers to connect the Yatsi to the lines of a trigram. So let's start with trigram mountain. Mountain has Li Chun in the middle, which is the middle line here as well, and which means that the Yahtzee before number 1 should be number 24. And then we have the second Yahtzee connected to the top line, and you can just use this principle for the next trigrams. So then we have here thunder, and then this is the third Yahtzee and the fourth and the fifth. Then we go to trigram wind, and wind is connected to the sixth, seventh, and eighth Yahtzee. This is how you can connect these 24 Yahtzee to the 24 lines of the 8 trigrams. Now, isn't that interesting? And suddenly you have a very narrow time frame for each line of a trigram, namely 2 weeks for each line. And you can use this system when you have moving lines. So if you have only one moving line in your hexagram, then that one moving line can point to a very specific time frame. And you could also say that the lower trigram refers to timing that has to do with yourself, with preparation, with some kind of inner work, whereas the upper trigram has to do with everything that you manifest outside. So projects that you are working on, things that the outside world can see and that you're participating, sharing with the outside world. So the lower trigram can be seen as things that you do on the inside, starting dates connected to inner processes, whereas the outer trigram can revert well to everything outside of you. And that is how you can use the lower trigram and the upper trigram to choose the right timing. If you have only one moving line in a trigram, then the timing is quite easy. If you have more moving lines, then the timing becomes, of course, a little bit more difficult, because then you have more of these Yahtzee to look at. And personally, I would say if you have a lot of moving lines in your hexagram, that might indicate, because moving lines, in my view, are lines that are unbalanced and that need to be corrected. Balance has to be restored. If there's so much imbalance in your hexagram, it might tell you, well, there's so much you have to adjust, so much that you have to correct, that please work on that first before you choose the right timing. So the more moving lines, the more my advice would be not to choose any time frame at all. So, but anyway, this is what I wanted to share with you, how you can use trigrams for timing, and how the 24 Yahtzee can be connected to the 24 lines of trigrams. So, and I'm sure you will have a lot of questions about this, how you can use this practically, and if I have examples of usage of this. No, I haven't. But it should give you some ideas how you could try to use this. And also it shows you how the ancient Chinese connected the solar calendar to the trigrams, and how they worked with that. So that's what I wanted to share with you. This was a very improvised video presentation. But I plan to do more of these. My former videos were always scripted with teleprompter or autocue or whatever you want to call it, which is very convenient because it gives me a text that I can just read aloud. And I can use it for subtitles in YouTube, but it's also extremely time consuming. So I want to do this a little bit more. So this is unedited. I haven't cut anything out, and if it appears a little bit clumsy, I don't care. So practice makes perfect. So I want to do this a little bit more. And if there are certain topics that you would like me to talk about, then by all means, just let me know in the commentary, and maybe I will do a very improvised video about that. Anyway, thank you for watching. If you have questions or comments, then just let me know. And well, have a nice day. Bye.